We always say you get in the room, you execute at the highest level you can, you keep your head down and you move on. And so that's the number one thing.
At New York Fashion Week 2024, Idea Generation and Complex partnered with Lexus to present a special live edition of Idea Generation featuring Tela and Bravado, the founders of luxury brand Who Decides War. Celebrated for a forward-thinking, high-fashion take on Americana that centers the stories of Black Americans, Who Decides War has since become one of the most acclaimed and celebrated brands in luxury fashion. Thank you guys for joining us.
Thank you guys for having us.
Yes, thank you for having us.
So I'm very curious, I think something like fashion, if you're drawn to it in the capacity that it becomes your profession, you have to have a very deep emotional connection with garments. And I'm curious, do you recall what the first items when you were growing up that you became fixated on were?
Well, I grew up in a tailor shop, so I was encased with clothes. But in the 90s, when I grew up, there was a lot of suiting and the shirts that were collar blocked with, it would be like a royal blue with a white collar, and then the cufflinks and just the proportions. And then also I was raised in a church, so that was the thing that always was major, was the Sunday morning outfits and the hats and the gowns and the jackets and the embellishments. So at a young age, I was always drawn to shiny things, and my parents always dressed well because, of course, my dad was a tailor and my mom, they appreciated dressing, so that was something that was sort of passed down. But yeah, that's like my first memory of clothes, is just being in a tailor shop and just seeing the suits and the proportions and the dimensions.
For me, I think it was just growing up. I didn't have a lot of money growing up, so and I couldn't afford. I was tall and skinny as hell, so I always had high waters. So, like, my jeans were always they were always too short. So I used to let them out, and then I also used to tailor them into my waist and all these things myself. Taught myself how to do that. My mom taught me, and then it was out of necessity, so I could be able to wear jeans that fit. So I had to teach myself, and so I guess in a way, denim is, or just a pant is probably the first thing I became fixated on. And then I had always loved dresses growing up, and then some of the first books that I purchased about clothing were about the art of dressmaking. So
I always think of, eighth grade as a very defining moment in a kid's adolescence. What were the brands that ruled your world when you guys were in eighth grade, respectively?
Jordan, Nike SB, Billionaires Boys Club, Kid Robot, Stussy, anything on Karma Loop. I don't think we have something like that. I guess Gen Z's equivalent of Karma Loop would be Instagram shops.
Yeah.
Yes.
But Karma Loop, like those days, like Android Home, like I'm really aging myself here, but those brands back then, like
10 Deep.
Yeah.
All those. Yeah. No, Karma Loop was big. Karma Loop was huge, but and the headquarters was in Boston, so that was sick. Did you say Ralph Lauren?
Yeah, I was getting like before it was like Ralph, Rockaware, Mecca, Nietzsche, Fat Farm, Academics, like those, like it was that, then it was like, okay, then we're getting to the streetwear vibes, but shout outs to, the Fat Farms, True Religions that.
I noticed that you were both raised in suburbs right outside of, respectively, New York and Boston. And I'm curious, how did the specificness of that locality sort of impact how you viewed culture?
I won't say that I grew up in a suburb of Boston. I definitely grew up in Boston. If you look on the map, I swear it's highlighted. It's Boston. But no, I grew up in Roslindale and West Roxbury, between the two of them. But that being there, what I can say is, like, being in a smaller city than a city like New York, that was quite a trickle-down effect. So watching, like, you know, a place like this, which is the birthplace of so much fashion, so much style, and just seeing how that, a lot of the times I felt very once or twice removed from certain trends and things. So the main thing was being out there and trying to like scrap for whatever I could find on the internet that was popping at the time, I think, you know. So with that, there was always that hunger that was forming, and then once I got to New York, it was like the true realization that this is such a hub for everything, and it's so tangible, especially with regard to fashion and style, personal style especially. So that's, I think, how it shaped me. I just kind of came alive when I came here, being able to define my personal style.
For me, I grew up in Elmont, so if you don't know where Elmont is, it's the first town when you enter into Nassau County. So there's Cambridge Heights in Queens, and then there's Nassau. So I kind of grew up in the cusp of Queens, Long Island, but really when I went back to school shopping, my dad would take me to like Jamaica Avenue or like Pickens in Brooklyn, and you know, it's like Jimmy Jazz and Cookies and all that sort of thing. So I really felt like I was in it. As I got older, you know, I would take the Q4 to Jamaica Station and then take the E train for about an hour and a half to get into downtown New York. And proximity wasn't an issue because the age we were growing up was so internet fueled. It was like we had this community that we drew together because we had certain interests. And within my high school, there were these kids who were going to the city every weekend and were working with Pharrell and working at BBC. And I was like, this is what I like and this is who I want to be around. So I just had to find my way on that train for 3 hours a day to get into the city.
How old were you when you had that clear thought in your head that fashion is what you want to do with yourself professionally?
Professionally, I want to say in my like junior or senior year of high school, it was the time where BBC was like this and Bape was like at its height in my respect. But I saw these things and I'm like, I want to do something like this, and how do I do that? And a lot of the time back then it was graphics. If you look at the Kid Robots, the Johnny Cupcakes of that time, it was graphic driven. So I was like, let me just start a brand and see what happens. And it really just starts with a community. And that's what we always preach to people who are aspiring to do fashion or any type of, you know, business. Really, it starts with who you know and spreading the seeds.
I think a large part of it too was also like us meeting up. I feel like that's when we both decided that we wanted to take it seriously. And I think that, you know, Ev's talent was so crazy, it was so present when we met. It was very easy to see, you know, and it was just like the surroundings and the conversation, everything was there, but it just needed like a little bit of structure. And so like the two of us coming together and working on that and working to grow like that conversation first and foremost before we were able to then, you know, step into something together. I think just having that trust and linking up together was really important. And I mean, Virgil, there was one interview where he was saying like, find some. Well, we were there. Was that
It was
actually at Complex Con.
Yeah, 2018 Complex Con.
Yeah, 2018 Complex Con.
Streetwear.
But he was saying to like find. We laughed at it because he was like, find someone who's really good at Excel and like keep that person close, you know. And that was so funny because that's like what I was, you know, without even knowing, you know, that was like anything that someone else was paying attention to. So that was a big thing for the two of us when we decided to take it seriously rather than like running around Soho.
Yeah, I guess we kind of changed each other's life for the better.
You mentioned, you know, building community, and it's interesting. I was talking to Tremaine for the show about a month ago, and something that dawned on me while we were talking was that both him, Virgil, yourself, Jerry, so many people in that class started their careers promoting parties and then shifted from that into fashion. And I'm curious, in your mind, like, what is the connection between those things, and how does becoming good at the one inform the other?
I mean, I think it's just a conversation of where the culture is for real and community-based work. And I think a lot of things with fashion, any kind of brand, I mean, the best marketing, the best conversation is when it's authentic and when it's organic. Also noise helps, being in a space where you can create noise and you can have a conversation and the same people, everybody, this, first of all, a common ground for parties, in New York is you never know who's going to be around, who you might meet, that's why the nightlife is so huge out here. But from there, then I guess that community translating that into product and then being able to have people that support you on a really grassroots level is that's something I could say, that definitely lends to that larger conversation.
Ev, when you guys met, I'm curious, we've heard Tela's what she thought of you and how impressed she was by you. What was it about Tela that drew you to her and made you want to partner with her?
I mean, definitely her passion, and doing this so long with a partner, you have to have someone that balances you. So me, I'm a person who I'm very emotional and I lead with emotion a lot of time. And as I've gotten older, I've realized, maybe that might not be the best way to live your life. You might need to take a second, internalize your processes. And Taylor's always been a person where it's chill out, take a second. If you really feel that way, then think of a way to proper channel that and communicate that efficiently. But yeah, Taylor's so selfless that it's crazy to think that someone would give their all to this because, it's just something that I was doing then, and she was I could help you. And I was okay, cool, come help. And then it became a thing where it's wow, you're actually a really, really one of a kind, great person. And yeah, she's just I think it's just, we're very much entangled in a lot of parts of our lives because we have a kid, a marriage, a business. So what you see on Instagram is one thing, but on the other side, it's this person is amazing. So it's just seeing the good in a person and just the family values. I have very strong family values, and I'm would lay my life down for my family, and I've felt that when I met her. It's she would give her all for the people she loves. So that's where we connect, and I'm okay, maybe I need to be a little less self-centered and be more like her.
I mean, I think being an artist demands a certain amount of selfishness. Being a parent and being a partner in a marriage and in a business demands a lot of selflessness. Do you guys have to sort of talk these things out frequently as you're, navigating your way through the world?
I mean,
every day.
Every day. I think that it's so important to communicate. That's the number one thing. None of this would occur without communication, and we have to slow everything down a lot of the times just to ensure that we're on the same page before we can even move forward. I mean, that's just what's the most important thing, is being able to meet each other on the same level and just talk before, I think the superpower between the two of us is that a lot of time we're able to tune all of this out, all of this, any project, anything we're working on. And then we're able to just meet each other on a really human level and connect and talk from there. And then from there, I feel it's just a lot of it is, it's a lot of talking all day.
It's so much talking.
It's a lot, to all of our teams, to everything. And that's also it. We wouldn't be able to do anything we're doing right now, even on an interpersonal level. We wouldn't be able to do it without the team that we have and that we've cultivated, and those that trust in us, and we trust in them. Everything is very, very symbiotic and synergetic.
The road to Who Decides War was one with several false starts, with the Lease on Life Society and then the Bravado line. When you think back about those two sort of, entrees into the business, what are the things that you didn't know sort of were the difference makers? If you were reflecting now, having made it successful with, a line that is now 5 years old.
If you don't sweat the little things, they will become major problems. And I think, as a business owner, you can't get an invoice and be like, it will go away. Like you have to pay that, or it's gonna affect your credit, and it's things like that, and just as you get older, you have to figure out, or not as a brand gets older, it's like, okay, everyone that works for you needs to have some type of paperwork because so things don't get misconstrued. And that's happened so many times for us where you're like, oh, come just like help on this project, like we'll take care of you. And then the project is done, and then they're like, well, I feel I deserve this, but you never set a price, so now you're arguing about a price and what the person feels that they're worth and how much you feel a project's worth. And it's just really just dotting your T's and crossing your I's and paying attention to the details. And that's something that, as we've grown the brand over and over and over again, is something that scaled the brand. And also outsourcing. Like, what I would say for anyone that has a business or a clothing brand, the first thing you should do is get a 3PL, someone that fulfills your orders so you don't have to take that time to go to the post office and do that sort of stuff, because that type of time that you're putting in fulfilling these orders, you could be creating your next big thing.
The opportunities that you get to speak with and build relationships with anybody who you may, if you get into one store, the most important thing is to execute on the highest professional level that you can with that store, and then be able to have that relationship, have that reputation, and then cultivate that into something, the next store, the next 5 stores, and making sure that it's just, there's an integrity part of it. A lot of it is really important in that way, to have brand integrity, to have integrity as owners, so that's also a huge part of it, is that, yes, of course, freeing up space for you to work and have that liberty, but at the same time, making sure that you're really honing in on those relationships and holding space for those.
With the Lease on Life Society, I was watching an interview you did have, this is probably, 8 years ago now, and you seemed to be somewhere between ambivalent and almost cynical about the designs, and in the sense that you were really trying consciously to make something that would sell, as opposed to just channeling your own creative voice. And as I've watched all of these interviews over the ensuing 8 years and looking at how the line has developed and the confidence that you have, it seems that you have moved away from that. And I found that interesting, given the fact that, in fact, the stakes of your life have increased dramatically now with the child and marriage and all of the sort of adult responsibilities that go with it. And I'm curious, how do you guys think about, wrestling with what the market wants and what you want to make?
I mean, yeah, that's a whole journey, because I remember that interview. It might have been with one of my dear friends, Kadeem Fletcher, of like ILS magazine back in the day, or like something like that. But at that point in my life, it was an output of just like, okay, I need to get to tomorrow. And, I came to a point in my life where I figured out the community that supports me and the people who support me, I cannot take them for granted. And I have to deliver product that they really cherish and enjoy. And I had to look at myself as a consumer and be like, what makes me inspired and what makes me feel like a warm feeling inside? So when I create something now, it's like to evoke emotion. If it's not to evoke emotion, it's to portray something I want to see in the world. So if it's not doing one of those two things, then it doesn't deserve to be on the runway, or it doesn't deserve to be on the rack. And, I've had so many great mentors in this game, and one thing that I've been told is commercial looks different for everyone. So a commercial piece for Who Decides War might have 4 patches of embroidery, a million rips, and joining and distressing, but that is what people see as commercial from us. So it's really just finding that lane, and things got serious when we had a kid. So I had to figure out, okay, if it's not fulfilling a need in myself emotionally, it needs to fill a void in what I'm seeing in the world.
How do you guys think about the convention of naming and the significance of the name of a brand? Because clearly there is a through line between all of those lines aesthetically, but it was clearly a very pointed decision to launch and relaunch with new names.
I guess I'll start with Lease on Life Society because that was like before we like even knew each other. But I was super young and it was just really a thing where it was like cliche. Like renew your lease on life. I thought it would be like a great tagline for a brand. And as I got older, I'm like, this is kind of like cheesy and corny, but to me, it's like it's always remained true in every rebrand that we've done. It's a point of self-reflection and self-mirroring in a sense of, okay, you could do better or there's a higher purpose in your life. So I guess that's the one thing that remains true, and that's where it started with Lease on Life Society, and then Murder Bravado was essentially the killing of one's ego. Again, just, serving to a higher purpose.
With Who Decides War, it's clear that you have a very distinct story that you're telling with the brand. And I'm curious, how did you think about the world building involved in creating this sort of 360 of the brand? Like, do you have rules that define what makes a garment Who Decides War or not?
I mean, there's definitely house codes, and I think the thing that we've been touching upon lately is beautiful ruin. So it's making these beautiful garments that look completely destroyed or just, I don't want to say undone because everything that we do is intentional to each piece, but it's making the pieces, when you get them, have a feel of they've been lived in and they've been thought about. We use pretty much the same techniques throughout every textile that we touch, whether it's leather, lace, organza, chiffon, denim. It's distressing, overdying, washing, processing, and it's rebuilding. It's building, destroying, rebuilding, destroying, and building again is really how we look at every piece. And as of late, we've been looking at every piece as like, okay, where could this go the extra mile? Even if it's just a t-shirt, how do we make this Who Decides War, even if it just has a graphic across the front of it?
I don't really have much else to add other than doubling down on the fact that with every garment, especially this season, we've been looking at things, and so many times between menswear and women's wear, we've said, this is too pretty. Great, this is a beautiful garment. Okay, sick. Now what? Like, we need to make it our own. And so I think that's also cool, is knowing that we've reached this point where we know we can create really flawless garments, but that's not really what this is about. It's about storytelling, and it's about a conversation with us. The whole, tying back to what he's saying, our whole messaging this year is like just about beauty and then also about ruin, and tying those two things together. And a lot of the intersection of the clothing really is where the clothing is birthed from. So yeah, just making sure that nothing is too pretty.
What are the words and feelings that you hope for your line to elicit in an audience?
I mean, definitely something, period. Like, an emotion needs to happen. Otherwise, I feel like it's pointless. We try to be really intentional with everything that we create. I think we have that responsibility as just designers in general. There's so much BS out there, so I feel like it's really important to be intentional with what you're creating, just from a sustainability aspect.
It boils down to home cooking. When you go home and this meal was prepared with love, I think that's the type of feeling we want to emit. Is, when your mom makes your favorite dish and you've been away for a while, we want to emit that feeling when you get our clothes. It's made with love and it's thought with care.
I was checking out an interview. I think you sat with James and Larry from Throwing Fits, and in passing mentioned that the brand has been profitable from day one, which is a rather Herculean thing for a small business to pull off. What is the key to doing that?
The key to doing that is reinvesting in yourself and taking a chance on yourselves over and over again. We've had a lot of moments that I think could have been considered like, a final success point, if we wanted to be big-headed about it. But the main thing was keeping our heads down and continuing to work. And reinvesting that capital that we had made back into ourselves, back into our product, into development, into scaling, into hiring, every last thing. It wasn't about, oh, now let me go celebrate and go take everybody out to dinner and go buy myself a new whip. Like, it was nothing like that. It was just every last thing was, okay, we did this. We always say you get in the room, you execute at the highest level you can, you keep your head down and you move on. And so that's the number one thing.
And I also say to like anyone that has a brand who's starting a brand is pay attention to what's moving and what's working for you. Just because your friend might have a line that does really good footwear and they're great at it, doesn't mean that you need to do footwear. If you're selling hats and you're selling 1 million hats, keep making hats until it's done and then, start to dabble in other things. But I feel like where we've lost some type of, I don't want to say lost, but where we could have maybe maximized on certain things is where we stopped doing something because we thought like, okay, this is played out. But then 3 or 4 years later, we still see the trend that we might have created going super strong. And then we're like, wow, we pioneered that, but we didn't maximize off of that. So I'll definitely say for anyone who has a brand out there and you see that there's momentum in a product or a type of category, like, beat that horse until it's dead, for real.
You guys birthed the brand really on the doorstep of the pandemic, which, was a very scary moment for, I think, all people in, apparel, retail, etc. And, it ended up being a bit of a boom for the athleisure line and some people that made sweatpants and hoodies and that kind of thing. Obviously, you guys make clothes that are made to be worn outside and to be seen by other people. What were the biggest challenges that dramatic shift in the world presented?
We were in a really special place with regard to our product in the marketplace because we make clothes, yes, that want to be seen outside, and ideally you would want it to be positioned outside. However, there was still a lot of circulation on, like, everybody moved to a hyper digital format. So with that, people needed things to wear within that format. So I wouldn't say that, we didn't really face a challenge there with regard to it. However, the only thing was that we really started developing softer things, cozier things that could be worn within the house, or within, a pretty domestic or recess setting. But I think that was it. So we really launched like our Terry program and our Jersey program. That was where we did have to pivot for sure. Denim can only be worn for so long in a comfortable setting before it's uncomfortable. So we definitely switched there. Yeah.
The line has a very prominent sort of attachment to the sort of iconography of Christianity. And, Ev, you mentioned growing up in the church. I'm curious, is that a shared sort of relationship for both of you guys? And are there specific like stained glass windows that you've seen growing up or that you've seen that have inspired, pieces within the collection?
Yeah, I'll just speak to the shared, if it's shared or not. I mean, I was raised Catholic. My mom is very Italian, very Jersey. So I was always in the church every Sunday, in catechism, every last milestone that you have to hit within the Catholic religion. But with that, I was always in church a lot, and I was always quite bored in church a lot. And the one thing that used to keep me entertained was looking at all of the stained glass windows. So that's just a nostalgic point for me.
Yeah, I mean, from the first memories I was in the church. My grandmother's a pastor, my dad's a pastor. I've fell asleep in church, woke up, thought I'd be home, I was still there. So, it's a major part of my upbringing, and I think the one thing that I take from it is, like, treat others how you want to be treated, and just be a good person. At the end of the day, like, what you put out in the world is going to come back to you, so just be positive, stay positive, try to do the next person how you'd want to be done to yourself. And with the iconography, it started as one image, and then we figured out like, okay, we could take inspiration from any type of artwork that we like or anything that we see in the world and set it into this window and make it ours. And we've owned that, and we do own it. So it's just something that, you go around the world and you see the Notre Dame or St. Peter's Cathedral, and you think about who decides war.
Tomorrow, you are going to be presenting a line in your latest runway show. What is the process between the two of you for, seizing upon an idea and a guiding aesthetic for a collection, and then building out the accompanying world that you want to present it with?
The first thing is that with the design process, everything is really 50-50. It's really hard to pinpoint one person who's created something A to Z because neither one of us really move unless we've tapped in with the other to see what we're thinking and each other's feedback. But then further now, like to our team, now that we've grown our team, everybody knows that they have that level of comfort to have a voice in that room. So I think that's the first thing with regard to our process. And so, it shouldn't be carved out that I just did women's wear and Ev assisted with so much of, we did it together, the same thing with the men's wear. It's like every last bit has been checkpointed by the two of us. So I think that with regard to that was also something that we wanted to make sure was translating with regard to our world, is that this time we wanted to step into a space where the two of us are both standing on our own 2 feet and that we both are having this conversation, together.
Obviously, the fashion industry is one of glamour. However, to be successful in fashion, there is quite a bit of unglamorous work that happens behind the scenes. And I know you guys operate a very small team where you are involved in everything from the administrative and the, Excel spreadsheets and the invoicing and all of this type of stuff. To a young creative that is interested, what percentage is the fun part versus the not fun part?
I would say it's fun maybe 30% of the time.
Oh.
That's aggressive.
That was generous.
Yeah, I'm being positive. Like, tomorrow's a show that's fun. I mean, as Taylor said, thank God for our staff, because if we didn't have the staff, we wouldn't be able to be here to talk to you guys. But what you see on Instagram is not what it is. Like, we make it look great, we make it look cute and packaged and with a bow, but behind that is a lot of arguments, tears, back and forth, headaches, and just thank God for our lawyers, I'll say that.
Yeah, no, I would say it's about 99.9% not glamorous. And then there's our couple moments a year that we get to pop out and join the rest of the community and say hi and say, hey, this is what we've been working on and thank you for coming to watch it, and see this kind of crazy world that we put together. But so much that goes into it is really about the work behind this whole highlight reel that you're seeing, and don't for a second think that it's the way that it is behind the scenes. And seriously, I talk to my son about this all the time. I talk to every staff member that I have. They're all really, not really young, they're much younger than me though, but they're like straight out of FIT and Parsons, and also just raw talent, self-taught, just like us, but talking to them all the time about how important it is to put that work in. And they are learning that firsthand. Like, working with them, they inspire me by how hard they're working, because there's so much instant gratification right now. And, I feel like everybody kind of sees this, and this has been a conversation that's been talked about. I'm not the first person saying this, but I think that it's so important to continue working and continue the baby steps, like celebrate the baby steps for real. That is what is getting your larger picture communicated. So that's the unglamorous side.
What is the most tedious part to each of you?
Payroll. I hate doing payroll, but you got to pay your employees. But every other 2 weeks when I had to sit down and hey, did you take a break this day? It's like, but that, and I would say emails. I used to love emails, but now I hate looking at my phone.
I do not and have never shared that same love for emails, but I think that yeah, the most tedious part is I'm always in Excel. I will always build a budget out. I will always forecast. I couldn't, just the way I am about business in general, I could never give that entire, just the baby that I've built, this whole entire thing, I could never give it to someone else blindly and just be like, hey, you're running this now. The both of us, we still keep such a hand in everything that we do, and that's the thing, we've done every job, so there's no moment of not knowing what someone else has done. I can still log into my entire inventory system and be able to pull up anything with any code at any time, and that's the part of it. I'm not saying that to toot my own horn. I'm saying that that's really important for you to know every aspect of your business, no matter what industry you're in. It's very important to know. Take a day, even learn a different skill within your own job so that you can be proficient at that skill, and know that you can communicate with your staff member or anybody who's partnered with you on a real level, not just you trying to ask questions to figure it out, but you actually know the process. So that's all.
Looking at your guys' feet, I'm reminded that you guys have had a number of very successful collaborations with H&M and Basquiat, Off-White, most recently with Jordan. Tell me, what is the key to pulling off a successful collaboration?
The first thing I think is if we even vibe. Like if there have been huge partnerships that we've walked away from where everything was going great but then the vibe is just off and it's like we just can't. All that is like a little flag that potentially somewhere down the line this might not be like what all that it's cracked up to be. And I feel like every time that we've walked away from something, it's only pivoted us towards something better, even though there's always that moment, we're human, we all have that letdown, that could have been a big thing here, this could have been that thing. And but I think every time it's always been a pivot in the proper direction. But the number one thing is if you have to, on a human level, and we're serious about that, you have to connect with the team that you're working with first and foremost.
I want to say all of the collaborations we've done have made sense, and the consumer's not. I would say the consumer is not like, what is this? Didn't come from anywhere. I feel like we're in a place within the fashion space where someone will collaborate with someone just because of a check, or they might think it's cool, but they don't do the knowledge. But, I think for us, that's the main thing. It's like, does this make sense? When our consumer in the community sees this, they're going to feel that same home cooking feel,
To most people in this room, you guys appear to be extremely successful. However, success is something that each person defines differently. How do each of you define success?
I define success when you're able to take care of the people around you and just provide a sense of ease around them. For me, I come from a household where both my parents are first-generation immigrants, and they had to work extremely hard to get where they are. So I guess my goal is to take care of them where they don't have to lift a finger anymore.
I would agree. I think it's just about being able to be a resource. That's where success comes from. For me, so many times I wish I had somebody to be able to talk to, look up to. The only time really that I feel really successful is when I'm able to impart knowledge or pay it forward towards somebody else. And I think I've always been like this. I'm terrible at replying to things on Instagram and whatever social media, but if there's somebody that I see who's young and reaching out with questions or anything, resources on how to start, the coolest thing that V did was the free game seminars and the website that he created with all the resources. Doing something like that would be insane. So that's, for me, that's my next step. That's what I look at in terms of a metric for success, I think.